paper. It's springtime. We've got a big agenda in front of us today. And I welcome the councillors, members of the Independent Māori Statutory Board to this meeting. I welcome members of the public and media and our staff. I will commence with apologies for today, and I have an apology from Councillor Cooper and Councillor Mikely and Independent Māori Statutory Board Leanne Nāmani, and welcome Renata Blair in her place today. Welcome Renata. And Councillor Clow for lateness, and I'll move acceptance of those apologies. Do I have a second? And Councillor Casey, thank you. All those in favour say aye, contrary no, and declare that carried. Members, are there any declarations of interest on any item on the agenda today? Quite a dense agenda. Anything that needs to be brought to our attention now? If not now, later on as members come in. Nothing there. I'll confirm the minutes then for the 27th of July. I'll move receipt, and Deputy Chair will second, and Councillor Denise Lee. All those in favour say aye, contrary no, declare that carried. There are no petitions under 4, which brings us to public input. Members, as is per normal, I let the meeting know where I have declined public input. I have declined on 2 counts. One has been redirected to the appropriate committee. Yes, both have been referred to the appropriate committees of either governing body or the Environment and Community Committee. But we do have a number of parties that have been accepted to convey messages to us all here today. Welcome, Mayor Goff, to the meeting. Welcome. And we have 4 submissions to be made today in our half hour that's set aside for public forum. One, though, has now requested to be withdrawn. Of course, you accept that. We accept that. And that is from Generation Zero, having seen the recommendation for Midtown. That is our solution to Midtown bus arrangements. Generation Zero were major contributors to that solution. They've seen the recommendation likely to go through and have now withdrawn. So acknowledge their contribution there. We have Ian Free from the Auckland branch of New Zealand Society of Authors with colleagues. Charlotte, they will look at a presentation on poetry and bus shelters. Simon Shepherd discussing Wynyard Precinct. Charlotte Fisher on the future of the tank farm. And Helen Andrews and Charles Marr regarding the Oronga private plan change proposed, I think, in the second item today. That's for the area of Karaka and Drury. So I will firstly invite the first of our submitters in the public forum, Ian Free, to come up to the table and introduce his colleagues and the concept that they are to convey to us here today. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like to introduce my colleagues. On my left, Jacqueline Celia Carter, a poet who is fluent in English and in Maori. She lives in St John's. And on her left, Professor Bernard Brown, who's published many books of verse and has recently been made an honorary chairperson of the New Zealand Society of Authors in recognition of his 40 years of service. Despite his accent, he is a good Aucklander. My background is that I've been a bookseller around the world, a publisher in New Zealand, and a university teacher in Auckland. Our kaupapa today is to ask the council to work with us in getting poetry to have a higher profile in Auckland. It's not a costly exercise. It's not a new idea, but it's a good idea, and it's been done in many places before, even in Auckland. That's the wrong slide. Can we go back to the list of...
That's right.
There, that's the one. In London, the Poems on the Underground is famous and has included New Zealand poets. In the United States, the American Poetry Society keeps 20 cities on steady rotation for having poetry on public transport. I've gone a bit dry there.
You okay, Ian?
That's okay, thanks. I'll come right. The reason why the next slide shows central government is because they are some of our allies. The Department of Internal Affairs has an office of ethnic communities which is funded to provide support for ethnic communities and in particular their language. They recognise the importance of language in the happy development of societies. And of course there is no shortage of organisations of writers. So what we're proposing is not high cost, and I have made an approach to the Department of Internal Affairs, and the vibes are good, although the decisions have not yet been made. This is the sort of thing that we think we might work towards. A shot of some part of Auckland and a relevant poem. Most of us have had hearts of anger as we cope with the traffic crash, and Baxter speaks to all of us and for all of us, I think. Here is something that celebrates Auckland. Our view is to get poetry from young people, from mature people, and from as many community groups as we can. Bob Orr works on our waterfront. He's a first-class poet, highly recognised, and there he celebrates a moment when he was starting work in the early morning, and that was the slide that was selected to support that poem. I'd now like to ask Jack Carter to continue the presentation.
A tēnā koutou katoa, tuatahi kei te tautoko nā mihi kua mihia kia koutou katoa nā me mo te kaunihira. He uri tēnei o mā tātua waka, ara ko Ngāti Awa, ko ngai te rangi nā iwi, hononga hoke, kia Ngāpuhi, Ngai Tai, Ngāti Maru, ko te nuinga o ku tūpuna, he pāhia i ahu mai, I ngā rangi, I airini, ko te mana hoke, ko Jacqueline Carter tōku ingoa. As Korowin said, I'm a member of Te Hā ki Tāmaku, which is the Auckland Regional Division of the National Organisation of Te Hā, a national organisation for contemporary Māori writers, which is also affiliated to Toi Māori, Māori Arts New Zealand. Korowin approached us to see if we would support this project, and obviously we support any initiative that brings poetry in particular out of books and into public spaces where it will be read by people who don't normally read such things. We also support any initiative that supports Māori writing, both in English and Te Reo Māori, and also writing by all other peoples who have chosen to make Tāmaki Makaurau their home. We also note that Auckland Transport has agreed to implement bilingual signage on public transport, and we believe that this project will complement that initiative by showing the poetic side of Te Reo Māori as distinct from the language that is used every day. The slides included here have been chosen by Korowin and Matua Bernard to represent both the Māori oral tradition, including whakatauki or proverbs, as well as written in the forms of poems by Māori writers in Te Reo Māori. Te Hāki Tāmaki are also interested in the inclusion of contemporary Māori writing in both Te Reo Māori and English in this project, and in Māori translations of other poems if that becomes a part of the project. We're also interested in the vast number of contemporary waiata which are written in Te Reo Māori, which we see as being similar to poetry, also being represented in this project, and ideally with English translations.
Kia ora, Jack.
So the following slides are just a taste of what is possible. Please forgive the typos for those of you who notice, as well as the gender bias in one of the translations. I didn't see them until it was too late to change them, unfortunately. But the first one is the whakatauki, he moana puke puke ki ngia i te waka, a choppy sea can be navigated, or meaning that all of our difficulties can be overcome. Ko papatuanuku te matua te tangata, Mother Earth is the parent of all people. And the last one is an example of a poem written by one of our greats, the late Dr. Meremere Penfold, companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Māori, who was of Ngāti Kuri descent. Among many things, a former lecturer of Te Reo Māori at the University of Auckland and one of the founding members of the University of Auckland's Marae Establishment Committee, which was actually the subject of this poem. The poem uses part of an ancient cosmological chant describing the creation as a way of describing the process by which the idea of building a marae at the university came into being. We hope that you will also allow this whakaaro, or this idea, to find physical form in the shape of poems all over bus stops, ferry buildings, train stations, and perhaps on all of those forms of transport as well, so that Aucklanders of all backgrounds and languages find themselves reflected in the walls and corners and hubs of their city and can feel themselves and their languages to be valuable and integral to the city and all of its peoples. Nō reira, haere tonu ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Jack. So what we're asking is your support to approach AT to convince them that it's a good idea to decorate their bus shelters and perhaps their buses in the same way. This will make Auckland, will prove Auckland to be the more vibrant city that we all want it to be. And it is a vibrant city. There's poetry being written all over Auckland, good poetry, in many languages, and we have an opportunity to reflect that. Thank you for your attention, and we are very welcome. We are very willing to answer questions.
Thank you, Ian, Jacqueline and Bernard. Members, I'm proposing that we refer this to Auckland Transport for their consideration and feedback, but questions from members at this stage? Councillor Hulse.
Thank you. Thank you for a fantastic presentation. Are you looking at further advocacy for poetry in other public places? I think we all know the waterfront in Wellington, where you sort of wander and read poetry, and we're very interested, Mr Chair, perhaps to check with the group to see if during that advocacy to Auckland Transport, if we could extend the vision a little bit to perhaps some of the other spaces that might be useful. And while I wait for the group to answer, I'm going to do a shameless plug for Going West Literary Festival starting this Friday and this weekend out west, which will be fantastic, including poetry slam, free events with poetry, young people doing poetry. Please come, please support it. So just checking that it's a useful discussion to look at other public places.
Absolutely. Yes, we would definitely hope our poetry goes to the west without going west.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Renata Blair.
O tēnei ka mihi atu ki a koutou. Tō rōpū ana reo e pua wai ana a kai wahora ki Tāmaki Makaurau. Mā tō tīma e whakakotahi ai te taha Pākehā me te taha Māori. Ka nui ngā mihi ki a koe, Jacqueline, me tō tīma te hā o Tāmaki Makaurau. Hei rere te reo. Ai rungu te whenua, marungi te hau, ka mohio mai te nuinga o nā tangata e noho mai ki Tāmaki Makaurau. So I just wanted to acknowledge you today, saying it's an expression of biculturalism and the combination of te reo and te reo Pākehā is really important that it flies out there to the public. And that we can, if we can plant some seeds, whether they be at Auckland Transport or at other opportunities, it's something which I think the Independent Māori Statutory Board would support. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What a wonderful presentation, and what a fantastic and visionary idea. I just want to draw to your attention the degree to which the funding of bus shelters has actually been as a result of the partnership with Adshel. However, that shouldn't prevent in any way us looking to some form of creative expression. And I was just conferring with my colleague that even within the footpaths, even in a range of ways, even within our park space, there are lots of opportunities. So I support the referral of this to Auckland Transport, but I would want you to be aware that Adshel currently do and are responsible for a lot of the funding of bus shelters, and I know with the budget at the moment, we wouldn't want to start releasing them of that financial responsibility. So, but I think there are ways in which it can be woven in. So thank you.
Thank you. It is, we've got some 1,300 buses in Auckland. We've got hundreds of bus shelters. It is a minority that are Adshel shelters, and those are, of course, on terminating contracts. So there's lots of scope here, I think. Members, I just want to keep you watching the clock as well. I know there's keen questions here. We've got a number of parties yet to submit in public forum, and then we're going to hear from boards as well on matters. So keep that in mind. Councillor Filipaina.
Kia ora, Chair. A tēnā rā koutou katoa, and tā lofa lawa ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. Look, there's two of us who hail from Ngāpuhi, so hei mihi obviously to our iwi, but my Samoan side is saying to me, what options do you have as a group around getting our Pacific poets in the particular areas? For example, I hail, and my colleague Whaanana Fessel Collins, from the Manukau ward, which is the highest population of Pacific. So what options do you have around getting that our community, our Pacific community, but our community, I think, as a whole, in regards to getting their poetry as well on there? I think it's just a reflection of it. Kia ora.
We are very conscious of the fact that our latest poet laureate is Selina Tusitala Marsh, and we would certainly be in contact with Selina, who I think could probably give us, together with other members of the Pacifica communities, some very good insights into locations and also to other poets. Most of the Auckland writers of poetry do write about Pacifica affairs as well as other ethnic matters. So we are very, very conscious of that.
Cool.
Thank you. Look, there are being no further questions. I'll thank Ian, Jacqueline and Bernard. Councillor Hulse, would you like to move accordingly?
I'm really happy to move. Thank
Do
you.
I have a second?
Happy to see you.
Councillor Fletcher, thank you.
Say something? I had my hand up.
Oh, my apology. I'll just hold it there, and I do have your name here. Member Hinari.
Ko te mea tūtahi kei a koe taku tuakana, tēnā koe Jacqueline. Taku pātai ki a koe, ki a koutou. Given that both Renata and I totally support what you've said this morning, there is, I see, one difficulty, and that is IMSB's wish to have signage, i roto i te reo, throughout our great city, on our public transport, on our road signs, on most of the signage through our tamaki. I'm just wondering where it fits in. Should we go for broke on your idea, or should we go for broke knocking over the pushback that we get? Oh, it costs too much money, blah, 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 this, that and the other thing. I mean, I'm trying to work out for myself what part of the battle do we fight first? You know, we might get a hiding in El Alamein 1, but come El Alamein 2, we might be ready to push the board back. I mean, it's a silly analogy, but and sometimes some of our people, you know, we go and grab what we can. But the big battle in terms of IMSB is going the full hog in terms of signage on public transport, buildings, road signs, etc. Do you have a comment on that?
O tēnā rā koutou name mō te statutory board, koutou katoa. You know, Matua, my feeling really is that that was the first bus to pull up at the bus stop. So really, that has to be the first. I mean, we would, you know, as I said in my part of the presentation, we want Aucklanders to appreciate the beauty of the reo in all of its manifestations. So to me, that is the reo ōpaki. It's the reo that we use every day, and that is, I guess, the beginning or the place where all of us start in terms of learning te reo Māori, is whether it be as babies or as second language learners, we learn the basics. So when we're talking about signage, those are the things we're talking about. Kuhu mai, enter here, puta ki waho, exit there, those sorts of things. But the language that we're talking about, I believe, is the language that most of us who are, you know, frequent visitors to the marae and what have you, we hear that all the time, but it's not necessarily something in terms of te reo Māori that people are exposed to, on the streets of Auckland. So that is our vision for that, but obviously, I mean, for myself anyway, I would support whatever the statutory board believes is the most important take, or the take that needs to be supported in the first instance, but would hope that the members of the Kainihira would see that both of these are important for all of us as Aucklanders. And Matua, if I can just say too, aroha mai, I was aware of our time, and I had actually glossed over our Pacifica sisters and brothers, and I want to point out that a large part of the focus of this kaupapa is not just poetry that's in English or Māori, but poetry in all of Auckland's diverse languages, so that all of our peoples are fully represented. But yeah, kia ora tātou.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you all.
Thank you.
That will go through to Auckland Transport. Appreciate that. I need to move quite quickly now. Simon Shepherd, if you'd like to come up and you would like to discuss the Wynyard precinct. Welcome, Simon. Simon, I'll leave you to introduce your colleague.
Sure thing.
Yeah, it's good.
In your hands, Simon.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to thank those last speakers, and to say that this is actually a physical manifestation of some of those beautiful poems. I'm here with Charlotte Fisher, another artist who will speak next. Both Charlotte and I have homes a few kilometres from here. We have lived most of our adult lives and raised our respective families. We are both long practising artists involved in resurrecting marginalised materials into valuable objects. We have both have a focus on the harbour and its periphery in our work and in our pleasure. Charlotte's a classic sailing craft sailor. I have been stand-up paddling around the harbour edges well before it became popular. But the point is, if you get down there, Wynyard Point, in any kind of intimate way, as we have done in that environment, you quickly realise the shortfalls and the opportunities. And I'm going to speak to this 14-year-old artwork that I recently described to a well-known journalist as a fantasy sketch. Okay, so the core components of this proposed urban regional park are, for Wynyard Peninsula, are one, priceless sounds of New Zealand songbirds. And I think that is the most underestimated and dynamic, you know, factor of this idea that could really bloom. The priceless sounds of New Zealand native song, bird song. 2, pahutakawas and native trees, a natural habitat with winding paths, framing stunning views and providing organic decontamination. 3, a pest-proof fence with automatic sliding gates at the base of the peninsula, just like at Tawharanui, easily done, cheap, very effective on a peninsula. 4, beaches, not necessarily tidal, but with soft edges to the water and non-motorised craft. 5, repurposed tanks, a passive venue for local and international art, installation and performance. 6, modern mobile food kiosks and carts. Those things have really evolved into fantastic deliverers of affordable, high-quality gourmet snacks, food for families. 7, a classic ferry destination, among others, in that harbour. That in itself, a journey. 8, Māoritanga and waka presence, easily integrated into a concept, into a scenario like this. And last but not least, there's a kind of an element up there of the Peter Blake Memorial Optimist Fleet to teach ordinary kids, ordinary Kiwi kids, how to sail. The image, the artwork was going to cease being developed in about 2003, so that's why there's not that many people or stand-up paddle boards in there, but, you know, an idea like that would be packed weekend, day and night, I would say, and during the week. Okay, a little history about the journey of this artwork. It came out of a council commission in 2001, and my research as lecturer at Elam School of Fine Arts. It has been in numerous exhibitions from Bath Street Gallery to the Wallace Art Awards. It was a centrepiece of many audio-visual submissions to different council planning committees over the last 14 years in these offices. And I'd like to think anyway, and it has been acknowledged by some, that it informed the Silo Park development, predicating it by 10 years. Generally, the Wynyard Peninsula plans have evolved in line with the logic and the values presented here, but, you know, as you'll see a bit later from Panuku, I think there's a way to go. 4, okay, this idea also predated the hugely successful High Line in New York. So when Charles Renfro, the senior architect of that project that he developed with New York artists, visited Auckland, he emphatically reinforced the idea of using those tanks for art and installation. That's the first thing he looked at. The TV3 journalist asked him, "What do you like about this city?" He looked around and actually said, "Not much, but I can see potential in those tanks." They don't make those shapes architecturally. So that was an international perspective. They also predated the London Tate Modern's expansion into similar tanks. They've made them work, they've decontaminated them, turned them into amazing art spaces. Huge tourist, flow. The beaches, since I came up with this, Charlotte and I have been working on it, these beaches have been put into Paris and Brisbane. Hugely successful public spaces. Soft edges, sand, they don't need to be tidal. This concept was commended by the renowned visionary architect and Mayor of Curitiba, Brazil, Jamie Lerner. It also envisaged the recently announced solar-powered lights on the Harbour Bridge arches, you can see there, but as you see, with more subtlety and cultural relevance than the nightclub version just proposed, which is great, but I've had good discussions with Ngāti Whātua leaders over the years and informal support. This without the resources of an architectural firm or the conflicts of interest of a developer, or indeed the formal and political limitations on city planners.
Simon, would you like to just come to your conclusion, and we'll hear from Charlotte, I think, as well. So we've got two public forum submissions here.
Fair enough.
That have merged into one, members.
Look, the concentric economic and cultural benefits of a public venue like this have powerful precedents in New York, Sydney, London. Ecologists have reiterated that this particular peninsula lends itself to pest proofing quickly, will fill with native birds. There's a stopover between the Gulf Islands and the Waitaks. Zealandia-style urban showcase of New Zealand's pure brand, natural decontamination, authentic, unimpeded public access. It's a largely uncelebrated stretch of water. It is. I mean, you can't get out there and actually feel it in the context like this. It's hard to imagine an alternative with such broad potential. Okay, in conclusion, the economic case is overwhelming, and I call on the council to do a cost-benefit analysis, or ROI, I think is the latest terminology, to prove to ratepayers and public that we don't need this. I think it's up to the council to prove that we don't need this. You know, you have to prove that we need more bars, more retail precincts, hard edge architectural spaces. You really think the public want that?
Okay.
Wait, one more thing.
I do need you to conclude quite shortly, and then we'll go to Charlotte, please, Simon.
Sure. This is an economic cultural blockbuster for families, young and old, valuable tourists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlotte.
Hello, councillors and Mayor. I understand the pressure for time. I'd like 5 minutes. Tank Farm Regional Urban Park. In 2003, Simon Shepherd lifted his gaze from an Auckland City Commission project to do with downtown and looked west to the tank farm. This image, Tank Galleries, is his sketch of ideas he had for the possibilities in the yet-to-be publicly controlled peninsula. In the 14 years since, we, the public owners and beneficiaries of that ownership, have patiently dealt with Auckland City and Auckland Regional Council, who bought the land off Auckland Harbour Board. Changes in organisations since have brought us Auckland Council, City and Sea, Waterfront Auckland, and now Panuku Development Auckland, all of whom have had control over our access to our land and harbour. Simon and I are both residents within the Waitemata Local Board area. We are your stakeholders. Simon and I, as artists, have the fortune to be less constrained by some societal pressures and have chosen to advocate for the possibilities on this site, different from the ones presented to you over the intervening years by CCOs. It was heartening to read in the Herald of all newly elected councillors how highly regarded your experience of Auckland parks and your determination and motivations to become representatives for the people of Auckland. Now you have an opportunity to act upon those experiences and give the whole of the Tank Farm Peninsula to its owners as a regional urban park. The folly of citing private residences and public open space has been recognised and dropped. However, the present iteration of the space swaps residential use to other commercial buildings on the west side of the peninsula. The history of negotiations with the public and marine industries around this area would speak to retaining Titan's business in Slipway in order to serve the fishing and yacht fleets, and Voss's Yard for public access to the waterways for small craft. Historically, public good buildings on our waterfront have been sold or put into long-term leases, effectively alienating them from public access. It is time now to stop and reverse this process. We, the residents of Auckland, have provided the whole of St Mary's Bay waterway to West Haven and Silo marinas. The ferry fleet, water taxis and cruise industries will grow and require more berthage close to the city centre. Simon's ideas for the tank farm include repurposed tanks, informal native plantings, access to the harbour for non-motorised craft, food carts and open space. With the population of Auckland city centre currently 10 years ahead of projections, we need all the public open space possible. Yet with the sale of QE Square and the nibbling away of Aotea Square, the opposite is happening. One reason for our vehement reaction against past and future plans to extend wharves along our waterfront is our need for the long view. The hard-won public space at the end of Queen's Wharf is our, western suburbs dwelling folk, first opportunity to look beyond the city to the Hauraki Gulf and its islands. It is not to be compromised. We know present public spaces on the landward approach to the tank farm are temporary. All sites currently occupied as playground, basketball court, grass and concrete platforms on either side of the 6 silos are development sites. I'm asking you, councillors, please, to go and look at these spaces and realise how inadequate existing zoning provision is for Auckland's rapidly increasing population. New York's Highline Park was an opportunity foreseen by an artist and one other who met at a community meeting. Its benefits as a post-industrial park have been many. The former fuel tanks in the Tate Modern Gallery in London and former World War II fuel tanks in Cairns Botanic Gardens in Queensland are 2 real-world examples of Simon's concepts. In tank galleries, in tank galleries, a cutaway tank illustrates possible uses in arts and sporting venue. Now imagine that cutaway tank on a rolling track system that could be set against a prevailing wind for that event. These are some of the creative possibilities for the tank farm park. Simon's image conveys a sense of informality and non-linearity at odds with the prevailing planning and landscape architecture being practised upon us in Auckland. As new councillors made clear in the Herald, we like our regional parks. They are democratic. Everybody gets a chance to visit and use them. We like native trees, we like native insects, we like native birds. The tank farm as an informal park will enhance wildlife corridors for the burgeoning populations migrating from the Gulf Islands and the Waitakaris through suburban refugia. The tank farm as a regional park will be low cost and high impact public space. It will be unique in the world. It will serve all Aucklanders and our visitors, those living in Tihana and Flatbush, Ranui and Mangere and Pukekohe. It can become a place teeming with life and give those cruise ship passengers who choose to walk a kilometre a particular experience not to be had anywhere else in the world. The impetus to finally make and open our park should not primarily be driven by the needs and wants of others and their commercial imperatives. Public open space parks should be created for all the residents of the city, for their recreational, physical and mental health. The time for awareness of this and your call to action is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Members, do we have questions of Charlotte and Simon? They're being done. Thank you very much, both of you. Some great ideas there. Reminds me of something I've seen in, I think, Copenhagen. Simon, you'll be aware of the reconverted silos there into apartments.
Yes, I have looked at those. Fantastic.
We're at very early stages in our ideas on Wynyard, and we won't be getting to Wynyard until about 2025 because there are leases. The final leases are to expire in that period. But the planning starts now. So thank you for your contributions.
Thank you, Chris. And everybody.
Members, can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Councillor Watson, thank you, and Councillor Simpson moved and seconded, and we'll refer thank the submitters and refer it to our Auckland Council staff for their consideration. Happy with that? Thank you. Councillors, all those in favour say aye. 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 Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you. We'll now move to another oral submission in the public forum from Charles Marr and Helen Andrews. And members, this relates to item 11 on our agenda, the Karaka and Drury private plan change request. Welcome, Charles. And welcome, Helen.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Charles Marr, founder and the Chief Executive of Marr Development Enterprises, in short, MADE. And I have here Helen Andrews, which is my legal advisor, and Mark Talmash back there, my senior planner. Perhaps I could start today with a brief introduction of who I am and what I'm about. I am a very proud New Zealander, born in Auckland, and I love the city. I'm also a very passionate developer that has been blessed with the opportunity to develop at scale and be the managing director for quite a few projects in town, ranging from 500 sections in the Manukau Flatbush area, 686 apartments in the CBD Auckland area, 1,000 plus sections within the Hamilton Rotokauri area, and our flagship project, Oranga, 1,350 homes within the Duri West area. I believe Auckland has a great plan to become the world's most livable city. And being a citizen and a developer, I wish to contribute towards this vision, starting at Duri. I have a vision for Duri, and it's a quite exciting one. I believe that it could be a place that is so attractive, so successful, that it could turn Auckland City around. I believe it could be a place where it can showcase what the unitary plan has aspired to, a place that showcases what livability really looks like. I remember sharing this vision in our social sector forum in the government agencies, and I said this could become a place of national significance if done well. And it was the chief of police that responded to me saying that, no, Charles, if this is done well, it will be of international significance. You see, this vision really starts with Oranga, which is the first mover and the first master plan community in the Duri West area. It is important that we set the standards right at the beginning and make Oranga an exemplar for the greater 2,000 hectares area that we're currently looking to develop as a whole in the Duri area. My aspiration is to be able to do something that is of the equivalent of the Hobsonville in the south, however, being led by the private sector. Now I want to pass the time quickly to Helen Andrews to go through our submissions today and why it is critical and unique in achieving the outcomes and the vision I described.
Charles, thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Certainly conscious of the time, and we're certainly also grateful for the opportunity to speak to the committee today and for the very constructive way that we have been able to engage with the councillors and council staff over the Oranga development to date. We're very pleased that that has resulted in the positive recommendation from your staff that you'll be considering later in this meeting. In light of that, and as Charles has foreshadowed, there's just 3 points I'll touch on briefly. The first of those is the features which make this Oranga development in our submission unique and mean that it is able to proceed by way of a plan change request at this point in time in a manner that is consistent with the future urban land supply strategy and the refresh to that this committee also recently approved just 2 months ago. So there are a number of factors that do make the development unique and mean that it can proceed at this point in time, and I will briefly highlight 4 of those now. The first of those is that the plan change request has been preceded by a very comprehensive and thorough structure planning exercise that was based very closely on Council's own structure planning exercise for Whanuapai, being a recent example, or the most recent example we have of Council's best practice structure planning. The outcome of that structure planning exercise was to identify that on any conceivable scenarios, and 4 different comparative scenarios were considered during the structure planning, the Oranga B land that the plan change request relates to is suitable for and is likely to be developed for residential development. And it is a logical extension to the existing Drury 1 precinct, which was approved as a special housing area under the Hasher legislation. The second point that makes Oranga B1 unique is that both Oranga A, the existing Drury 1 precinct, and B1 will be fully serviced by developer-funded infrastructure on a best for Auckland basis. and that has been planned since 2014, since the commencement of the Jury 1 special housing area. Thirdly, the infrastructure that Karaka and Jury Limited is providing for both Oranga A and Oranga B1 will open up zoned opportunities within Jury that are currently unable to get off the ground, and those areas are Hingaya, Jury East and Jury South. Finally, in terms of those unique characteristics, the plan change request is supporting precinct provisions which are already in place for Jury 1, which require the provision of 10% affordable housing. So despite those requirements not being carried through in the Auckland Unitary Plan as it became operative in part, those will still apply within both the Jury 1 precinct and, as proposed under the plan change request, within the Oranga B land area. The second point to very briefly comment on is just one matter arising from the officer's report, and that is where paragraph 47 of that report, which you will come to under agenda item 11, the officers have considered the various bases you have under the first schedule to the Resource Management Act for rejecting the plan change request. In respect of one of those under clause 25.4d, the officer has referred to part 5 of the RMA setting out the Act's sustainable purpose. Now, as some of the committee may be aware, the Act's sustainable management purpose is actually set out in section 5 of the Act, whereas part 5 of the Act addresses the contents of planning instruments, including district plans. So that is what the focus of that clause is. And in respect of that reason for rejection, it is submitted that the plan change request will not make the unitary plan inconsistent with part 5 of the RMA, given that the Auckland plan, the Auckland unitary plan and the future urban land supply strategy all indicate that Jury West has been identified as being suitable for the type of residential development that Oranga is proposing for Oranga B1. And indeed, the plan change request has been carefully drafted, as I've explained, in light of this legal requirement to have precisely the opposite effect. And secondly, the plan change request clearly demonstrates how it will meet the relevant criteria from part 5 of the RMA, and those include sections 72 to 76 in particular. The final point to very briefly note is that the material provided to officers to date now includes support for the project from both the Franklin Local Board and from all 3 relevant iwi authorities, and there's been very close and consistent consultation and engagement with them, which we've been very pleased to be involved in and to see occurring both in respect of the existing Jury 1 precinct and in the development of the Oranga B1 plan change.
Thank you.
So with those brief comments, I think Mr. Maher would like to conclude briefly.
Thank you, Chris. Finished.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Helen. Members, do you have questions of either Charles or Helen at this stage? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Helen and Charles, just very quickly, you haven't discussed the environmental work that you're pretending to or going to undertake with this works pertaining to Oranga 1 and B1, and you mentioned the affordable housing carrying through into B1. The scale of this project, does that allow increased infrastructure provision for the whole of the development? So 2 questions, environment and infrastructure.
Sure. So first, we are embarking on a project of regeneration of 3 islands that is on the northern western side of our development. That is working closely with EU and also the Department of Conservation as part of our Oranga B works. And that will really be quite a substantial project in its own right. The second one, in terms of infrastructure, we have future-proofed the infrastructure for our development A and B, as well as Jury East, Jury West, as well as Jury South. So in take for water and wastewater, it is future-proofed, and that's been done from the 2 or 3 years of work that's been spent to date.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
I don't often get the chance to talk to developers face to face. I just love to ask you about affordable housing.
Sure.
And what kind you're building and what cost will it be? What's the cheapest house you're going to build us down there?
Sure. So perhaps affordability, we've approached in two ways. One is houses, the other one's lifestyle. So about affordable living as well as affordable housing. In terms of affordable housing, we have, as a result of a master plan community, have a diverse range of products, ranging from apartments all the way to mansions and waterfronts. And so what happens is through diversity, it's important to get a certain percentage of a certain price range to get a certain type of people and demographics within the community to get them mingle right. Otherwise, you either build very rich estates or very, unfortunately, poor ghettos. And so what we're trying to do here is actually build real communities, and as a result, that the diversity is important. So we've approached it not so much for affordability purposes, but for diversity point of view. In terms of affordable living, it's about ensuring that all the things that we're putting in place are actually achieving efficient living rather than just houses and they're driving off to go to work and spending hours on the road.
So what was the lowest price?
So right now we have 550 to 600,000 is where our price point is.
How many people? Thank you. Member Blair.
Oh, kia ora, Charles. Thank you for your presentation. I enjoy talking to property developers too. I'm from the Independent Māori Statutory Board. Could you just elaborate on your views or your engagement with the iwi?
Sure. So we've actually started our engagement with iwi more than 2 years ago, and we felt that it was important to engage early because they have a lot to add in terms of the environmental thinking they have and how they wish to deal with stormwater and parks, and storytelling as well. And so what we've done is kept in touch with iwi every month, so they're very aware of what we're doing in terms of development of Oranga A and now also Oranga B. Just to give you some context, our relationship with iwi is very well established to a point where we requested a support letter within a day or two. They gave that to us in terms of their application, and so that's the closeness that we have in terms of our engagement with them to date.
Thank you, Member Blair. Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. And Charles, and Helen, with your kōrero, I got a wee bit sort of confused around the affordability percentage. Did you say that you were going to increase, even though there was a minimum 10%, that you're increasing the affordability percentage of the homes within Aoranga? I don't know whether I misheard that. If I have, my humble apologies.
Sure. So currently, our Oranga A is under an SHA legislation and is approved through HASHA and requires 10% affordable housing.
I understand that.
What we've done through Oranga A so far is increase that to 50% more, so 15% affordable houses. That equates to 200 homes that are affordable. Now, with Oranga B, we're continuing the 10% minimum of the affordable housing requirements, which equates to around 130 more affordable homes. So in total, we're talking about 330 affordable homes.
No, I thought there was, and just a supplementary on, Charles, on your 550 to 600, the price.
Yes.
Is that for a 3-bedroom home?
We're aiming between 2 to 3.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Charles and Helen. The report that's on the agenda says that the Papakura local board didn't support the private plan change at time of writing. Can you update due to infrastructure? And yet I've heard, sorry, I'm losing my voice, that you have future-proof some infrastructure. Can you update where you think the Papakura local board sit now?
Sure. So perhaps just from an infrastructure point of view, I'm actually working very closely with Watercare right now, with Ravine, and we're looking to make a media release probably in the next month or so, just telling them that we've unlocked the South in partnership with Watercare. In terms of Papakura, I think not quite sure what part of the infrastructure they're concerned about. Maybe there's a lack of ongoing detailed communications because we've been dealing a lot more with the Franklin so far. But I think that might just be a misalignment of understanding.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. And finally, Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Just got a question or two around sustainability. Quite obviously, something of this scale presents a number of opportunities, and opportunities conceivably that go beyond the unitary plan in terms of how you could work on energy supply to an area like this, encouraging solar voltaics, water, wastewater, water, and the like. To what extent is your development working with the housing industry, and the like to achieve those sorts of goals, so that you've got a project that goes from start to finish in terms of its delivery.
Sure. So on the topic of sustainability, we've looked at it from probably on two major anchors. There's probably more than three, but normally look at people, environment, and economics. We've focused quite a lot for the past few years on developing a place that is fostering well-being for people within the development. That's why it's a master plan community that is focused on people, designed around that, and how people can walk more, cycle more, and the likes. If you look at the streets and the grid network that this master plan has put together, we're decreasing the commute time for cars and also for pedestrians up to 20 to 30%. Now, we've done analysis very quickly as depending on local jobs, we should be able to contribute significantly in terms of CO2 emissions dropping, as well as time spent on roads. We're looking to build streets for people, not roads for cars. Now, on the power side, we're working with Counties Power right now in partnership of potentially a solar farm that's using our rooftops and having 6 square meters of solar panels on each homes and mandated. That really generates power, an alternative power source for a sustainable power source for Counties Power, which is struggling a bit in terms of their power right now. In terms of water, we've worked with the best practice with iwi's recommendations on how we deal with stormwater and how we discharge that, and working with the SMAF rules of this unitary plan moving forward. So best practice has been put in place as much as I know, but there's always room to improve from my end.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, members, for the questions. Thank you, Charles, for your presentation. Helen, appreciate it. And would somebody like to move the recommendation on the screen? Councillor Close, seconded by Councillor Cashmore. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no, and declare that carried. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Helen.
Sounds encouraging.
Members, we'll move along.